Okay, we will get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Canlon. I'm the Executive Director at the American Kratom Association. Thank you for joining us tonight for this important briefing call. Tonight, we'll be discussing the latest in our fight to stop a potential international ban on Kratom. I'd like to first personally thank and recognize the tens of thousands of Kratom supporters who submitted their comments during this fight. The show of support for Kratom was overwhelming and clearly demonstrates the support it has worldwide. After the speakers tonight, we will open it up for question and answer. Please feel free at the bottom. You can click on Q&A option, and we'll try to get to all of the questions. Tonight, we'll be hearing from a few folks. Mac Haddo is Senior Fellow at Public Policy at the American Kratom Association. We'll also hear from Kurt Bramble, Utah State Senator, who was instrumental in passing the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in his state. David Carlucci, former state senator in New York. And Jeff Laredo, former senior advisor for NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, who is now consulting with the AKA. So without any further delay, Mac, I will turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening to get this update on where we are with the WHO comment period that was just finalized yesterday by the FDA. And we have, in terms of the number, and everyone deserves a big pat on the back, we're now almost at 63,000 comments that were collected both through the AK portal and through the FDA's portal. And we have submitted our comments to the FDA, and even though it doesn't reflect it in their overall count, all of these comments were there. We are going to take the comments that we have collected, and we're going to take the FDA's comments, and we're going to make certain that they are all delivered to the WHO. When the FDA reported to the judge in the litigation that we initiated against the FDA to force them to open up the comment period for an additional period of time, they told the judge, the FDA told the judge, that the deadline that had been set by the World Health Organization was August the 27th. They claimed that that was an extended deadline from the initial deadline they were given of August 10th. The truth is that the deadline is September 24th. So we're going to keep the comment portal open at the AKA for an additional 3 weeks, just a day or so short of the comment period, to give us enough time to assemble the data so that we can submit it in a reasonable way to the FDA. So I think that we have the opportunity to get above 75,000 comments with the help of all of the Kratom advocates, all of you that are on the call, and making sure that we can do an outreach. And we're going to reinitiate our effort with the vendors to try to get them to contact their customers so that they can, for those that have not yet done so, actually sign up. Many people have asked me, and I've seen a lot of discussion on social media platforms expressing some concern about why we didn't get over 100,000 signatures. And I understand that, by the way, because all of us know that there is a significant number of Kratom consumers in the United States who are not engaged right now in the advocacy efforts. But I can tell you that when you get to the numbers that we are talking about right now, of 63,000 in terms of the current effort, potentially getting to 75,000, that they are significant numbers, unprecedented in many areas for doing this. But there's a reason why there is a suppression of some of the comments that otherwise would have been there. The FDA directly interfered when they did the stutter step on the availability of the comment portal. They made their comment portal extremely difficult to submit comments. And so it is unknown how many people got frustrated with that process, even though the judge, or they agreed after the litigation in speaking to the judge to extend the comment period. So that's one issue that's just technical in nature. But the truth is the FDA has attacked the Kratom community repeatedly over the past 5 years. And there is a fatigue factor that is clearly associated with people who see the attacks come. Those attacks are serious, by the way. We see what they did in 2016. We saw it again in 2017. We saw that, but for the heroic efforts of Dr. Jawad and Brian Harrison at the Department of Health and Human Services, Kratom would have been scheduled, and none of us would have known until the day that it actually was announced. The FDA is up to their nefarious actions all the time, but they're attacking us on the state level. just a prime example of that is that in the state of Oregon, despite the fact that the legislature overwhelmingly passed the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, the FDA came in and argued to the Department of Agriculture in Oregon that they should not be involved in the regulation of Kratom because it conflicted with so many federal laws, and that the FDA would not be able to cooperate with the Department of Agriculture on a host of issues because of their being engaged and involved with the regulation of Kratom. By the way, that regulation was designed to do one thing: protect consumers. And this is just another blight on the FDA for their failure to do what they should be doing to protect consumers, and they're actually getting in the way of state legislative bodies. The good news is that the governor has said in Oregon that she will sign this legislation next year if we shift the regulatory agency that will be responsible for the regulation to get the FDA out of the equation. And of course, we're going to do that. But that creates fatigue, right? We keep going back to the well. We keep going back to advocates to ask for their assistance. We keep asking advocates for their assistance, not only financially, but also in reaching out with a variety of opportunities. And so, reasonably speaking, there's this fatigue factor. And then we have the reality, and it's unfortunate, we have people within our community who have divided us. You have groups like the Kratom Herald that spews nothing but disinformation, and they sow discord within the community. And people are influenced by that, whether we like it or not. There are also people in the community that are concerned that the American Kratom Association is promoting a regulatory scheme that will put some of the small to mid-sized vendors out of business. That is untrue. What we will do is advocate for any Kratom vendor that is engaged in the sale of Kratom products, that they must do so following the standards that are required for any food processor in the United States. They have to follow good manufacturing practices. They have to make sure that the raw materials that they have are tested in advance of their being manufactured into finished products. They have to make sure that they're not contaminated, they're not adulterated. Those are requirements that if the FDA were doing their job today to properly regulate Kratom, they would have that obligation anyway. And the suggestion that we're trying to interpose a regulatory scheme on top of a vendor that otherwise is compliant is nonsense. We support every small vendor, every mid-sized vendor in the Kratom industry that is willing to invest in the resources that allow them to be compliant. We think competition is healthy, it's good. But the reality is that if you're engaged in a processing of a Kratom finished product that hasn't been tested, you're buying your raw materials from resources over in Indonesia, and you're getting into trouble with that if you don't test those materials. And we do want you to not be in this business if that's the case. So there's that tension that exists, and it is sometimes fomented by people who are more libertarian in their political philosophies, and they argue that we're just trying to put them out of business. We're trying to protect consumers. Bottom line, full stop. That's all we're trying to do. But the reality is that we have to deal with that within our community. So if we are looking for why these things are happening, it's the FDA wearing us down with one crisis after another that they create. It does require the attention of the advocacy community. It does require them to be active in it, and sometimes that's just not worth their time. And I get that and understand it. The only way that we can correct that is if we stay diligent as an advocacy community, and that we reassure and motivate our friends through our social media networks and do everything we can in order to advocate for their engagement on these repeated attacks. We are hopeful that the World Health Organization effort will be the final nail in the coffin of the FDA's attempting to schedule Kratom. They failed twice at the federal level in the United States. The second time was devastating to them because the Assistant Secretary for Health laid out the game plan for what they had to do in order to secure the scientific evidence that was necessary in order to have Kratom scheduled. And we know that's an impossible task because since 2018, when Dr. Giroir repudiated the FDA's position on Kratom, when he called it disappointingly poor evidence and data, the evidence has gotten better for Kratom. More than 100 new scientific studies. A new 8-factor analysis has been completed by Dr. Henningfield, and it identifies all of this new research, all of the new science that's been peer-reviewed and published, all of which argues for harm reduction, argues for kratom being a safe product when consumed and regulated appropriately, so that we're going to win this battle. But at the WHO level, this is the first time they've heard it. The FDA has clearly instigated it, and it is laughable for them. And they did it today in an interview that I had with a reporter, where it was reported to me that the FDA denied that they had anything to do with the World Health Organization taking up the pre-review on kratom. That's nonsense. Of course they have. They've been spreading the dissemination of false information about kratom for nearly 10 years now. And when you look at the surveillance documents that are used by the World Health Organization as the predicate for their opening a pre-review on kratom, it's all about the problems in the United States, all about deaths attributed to kratom in the United States, all about poison control center calls in the United States. This is the hand of the FDA, and they are responsible for it. And now they're going to have to own it, because we're going to be there with the world's leading scientists on kratom at Geneva in a virtual meeting on October the 11th to tell the expert committee that the criteria that they're using to determine whether kratom should be scheduled internationally is something that's going to be addressed specifically on a scientific basis. And they use pretty much the same standard that we do here in the United States to determine whether any substance should be scheduled. So I think that's going to be good news for us as we go forward, so that everyone understands what we're facing here. On October the 11th, the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence will convene their pre-review meeting. There will be a 2-hour public session. They are allowing individuals that want to make a statement 5 minutes. And so they're obviously going to have to filter through who they're going to allow to speak. We can make applications for it. We've got the leading scientists making those applications. They're also limiting the written submissions to 500 words or less, which is extremely limited, but we're going to do our best, and others have the same limitation, by the way. So we're going to do our best to put this issue forward. And we know that of course, the science will speak loudly to those individuals that sit on that expert committee. So if the expert committee determines that there is sufficient evidence to open up a critical review, they will do that within a month or two after their October meeting. They might do it immediately. And if they do that, we'll have 1 year in order to provide additional evidence to them about this. We're obviously hopeful that they will look at it and come to the conclusion that there's not sufficient evidence to continue with a critical review, and so that they'll just stop it there and allow it to be maintained on what they call their surveillance list. That would be a great outcome for us, because that would, again, repudiate the FDA's position that kratom is a dangerous substance. We'll hopefully get that outcome. If the expert committee determines to go to a critical review, it will then be evaluated in October of next year. And if they then determine that kratom should be recommended for scheduling, they will transmit that scheduling recommendation to the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs for placement on what's called the 1971 Convention for New Psychoactive Substances. If that happens, rarely is a WHO recommendation ignored by the UN Commission. And so we would be in tough straits. And despite what you hear from some people in the kratom community, that doesn't mean anything, it does. There is a statutory obligation that is on the books in US law in the Controlled Substances Act that says that any the recommendation for scheduling or actual scheduling action taken by the UN Commission obligates us to start a scheduling procedure, and that would happen. And so kratom would, within a very short period of time, be listed as a Schedule I substance if it gets that far. That, again, despite what you hear from people in the community, they're saying, oh, no, it's wrong. It is written in the statute, and you can take it to the bank that we're in a real fight here in order for us to protect the kratom community going forward. The fact of the matter is, we have to take this fight. We have to be aggressive in what we're doing in order to preserve the right that all of us have to make decisions independent of the FDA's over-regulatory agenda, to make sure that we can make our independent choices about what's good for our health and well-being. So I think at this point, before we actually get to questions, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Laredo, who's had tremendous experience here at NIDA, where he's looked at these kinds of scheduling recommendations. Then we'll ask David Carlucci to comment on how the WHO recommendation impacts state legislators as they look at this political landscape. And obviously that would raise questions. And then concluding with Senator Bramble to talk about how we simply have to be better, more diligent with the vendor community to make sure that we shrink the target that the FDA has on Kratom. So I'll turn it over to Jeff for a few comments.
Thanks, Mac, and thank everybody for joining us tonight. Mac, you're absolutely right. This is a serious fight right now. And, you know, as I think about what the FDA has been doing, a couple of reactions and then just a couple of bureaucratic notes. The first is, you know, I think some of you have probably heard me say this before. You know, as a 30-year Fed, most of those years working within the Department of Health and Human Services, the very fact of getting up on a soapbox and railing against the FDA is nothing I ever wanted to do. You know, I'm a team player. I was an HHS professional, and the FDA is supposed to be the gold standard for all kinds of things. They continue to be the opposite of that when it comes to Kratom. And it's intensely disappointing, but here we are. It's my opinion that what Mac was talking about in terms of sort of front loading our effort here to try to kill their effort up front, that's absolutely strategically the right thing to do, because even if we don't win, I mean, if we win right away, we're done, and that's great. If we don't win right away, we have several retreat points, and while if we fail at a couple of those points, things get harder. But there's no question, even things like a large number of comments, the 60,000+ comments that have been made so far. Let me repeat something that Max said. That is a big deal. When the federal bureaucracy, when the WHO bureaucracy sees tens of thousands of anything, quite frankly, it freaks them out, because at least technically they're supposed to look at all those things. Now, I personally don't believe that the FDA is going to look at all of those things, but I think the WHO is, and I think that the UN Commission is going to have to if it gets that far. So as a bureaucratic process, the effort that all of you have made so far and the effort that others will make at your behest really does matter. And it doesn't have to be an encyclopedic comment to folks. It can be short and sweet, but getting it on the books is what matters the most. It's like congressional offices. All you need are a couple of dozen telephone calls or handwritten letters to a congressional office on any topic, and all of a sudden, as if by magic, they pay attention. They may not do what you want them to do, but they absolutely do pay attention. A reminder also that, this is, speaking of bureaucratic processes, that is what this is. The FDA does its 8-factor analysis, and you've heard all of us talk about that in various ways for a while now. And the 8-factor analysis on which the FDA continues to base its work is completely and utterly obsolete at this point. Whatever we may have thought about it a couple, 3 years ago, the science has leapfrogged beyond it, and the work that Dr. Henningfield and his colleagues have done, creating a current and modern 8-factor analysis is what the scientific world should be looking at and will look at. And speaking of the scientific world, if you're wondering whether or not federal agencies like NIDA are paying attention, I can assure you that they are paying attention, because we talk to them pretty regularly to make sure they're paying attention, but B, just to talk with them and make sure that it's not always true that the federal agencies speak well or work well with each other. I know you'll be shocked to hear that. So sometimes we are able to play a facilitating role, even if it's just sharing information. So, when the FDA does its 8-factor analysis, they don't have to consult with NIDA to do that analysis, but they do have to consult with NIDA before any scheduling recommendation gets done. And you'll remember that, a few years ago, NIDA did concur with the Schedule 1 recommendation. They weren't happy about it, but they felt that they had to at the time. But NIDA was not informed of the Giroir letter when we found out about it. And of course, nobody was informed about it. When we learned about it, it was, it was a leak out of HHS, and it was 2 years old already at that point. So the FDA can claim various regulatory processes are going on, and therefore they don't have to be public about what they're doing. To the letter of the law, that is true, but unfortunately, it's consistent with their game, for lack of a better word, of keeping a lot of us in the dark and continuing their attacks while, on a really uneven playing field. So, Mac, let me stop there. It's getting more and more frustrating, especially for a career health and public health official who, especially in times of COVID, I want the FDA to be 100% pristine. And as we well know, they are far from that.
Amen to that. Senator Carlucci, if you'd like to give your perspective on this, we'd welcome that right now.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mac, thank you. Jeff, thank you. And I just want to thank everybody on the line tonight. Like Mac said, I'm a former New York State Senator, served in the state Senate for 10 years. And we have so much on the line right now. And I've been working with Mac and Kurt and the team to pass the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in state legislatures. And as you can imagine, if the FDA is successful here, this will be catastrophic to our cause. And so brass tacks, rubber hits the road. Jeff and Mac have said a lot already. What I would like to say is that we have the next month to do everything that we can to get more comments in front of the World Health Organization. As a senator, as a former senator, I was touched by the hundreds of people and thousands of correspondence that I received about Kratom and how important it was to people to live a successful, productive life. And the only way I was moved was by those personal comments, by those meetings, by those letters, and those phone calls. And that is the type of pressure that we need to put on. We've been given this gift of this extra month, and we need to treat it as such. And I know so many of you have done great things and have engaged your customers and your sphere of influence. And that's what we need more than ever. And what you've done already, let's do it again. Please send out another email template. Please make those phone calls, because as Mac has said, the more comments that we could put in place, they have to look at that. And this is a bureaucratic process, but remember, this was designed so that individuals can have a say, so that when the FDA does get something wrong, when individuals that have been touched by something can step up and share their story, this is our opportunity. So if we are successful here, it's really a ripple effect. It could be a ripple effect in the wrong direction or a ripple effect in the right direction. And if we have a victory here, it makes our work in the state legislatures so much easier. So the one thing I'll leave you with is this is the next 29 days. We have to kick it into overdrive and make sure we do as much as we can, whatever we can, to get those comments in place and make sure that the story that we've been telling for so long is really heard by those that need to hear it. So I'm just really touched by everyone being so supportive and so energetic about this cause. And with that energy, I think we will be successful. So please keep it up. And Jeff and Mac and everyone here, thank you for your comments and for working towards this cause.
David, thank you. Senator Bramble.
Thank you, Mac, and welcome everyone. By the way, I was going through the chat. Someone was saying, do they get to talk? As soon as we're done with our presentation, we're opening it up for questions and answers, and we're going to try to be as responsive as we can. So this whole battle with the FDA really at the root started with some adulterated product. You've all heard the story of the 9 deaths in Sweden, then the 44 deaths, and the toxicology reports that virtually every one of the fatalities that is associated, not caused, associated with Kratom, virtually every death worldwide that we've been able to identify. And when I say we, I've talked to representatives government officials with Health and Human Services. I've spoken with the industry. I've spoken with folks in Indonesia, the government, the Minister of Health and such. I have yet to be provided any credible evidence of one death worldwide that was associated solely with Kratom. The problem is we have some bad actors in this industry, and those bad actors, when I say bad actors, individuals who are manufacturing a product that for whatever reason, to maybe get a leg up on marketing or whatever, are finding ways to adulterate Kratom with other compounds, whether it's fentanyl or tramadol or whatever. The reality is the Kratom Consumer Protection Act that we passed here in Utah that has now been sweeping the nation, and we've had phenomenal reception, positive reception across the country. And I noticed in the chat, right now we have 170 people participating on this from across the country. The Kratom Consumer Protection Act goes right to the heart of the FDA's arguments that Kratom is dangerous. It's not when it's in its pure form, but when it's adulterated, when it's concentrated, when it's synthesized, that's where we've run into problems. And that's what the FDA is hanging their hat on. All we need is one major company to have contaminated product that has been adulterated or mixed with other chemicals or concentrating the alkaloids. All we need is one major case like that for the FDA to say, see world, we told you so, this is dangerous. We've got to do an absolute better job at making certain that number one, that the product is pure plant. Number two, we were at a trade show, the Champs show in Las Vegas. The vast majority of Kratom vendors and manufacturers and retailers that I interacted with understand that we cannot make medical claims about the plant. Again, every time the FDA can find a violation, they will treat that as if it were pervasive, ubiquitous, as if that represents the entire landscape for the industry. And because that represents the entire landscape, they have no choice but to shut it down. We know that's not true. We know that Kratom has been a lifeline for thousands of individuals in this country. We know that Kratom has been reported by those who use it to have significant positive efficacy for whether it's anxiety or pain mitigation or trying to get off opioids or withdrawal or all those kinds of things that folks are representing to us. The hundreds or thousands of emails that we've received, Kratom is something that is saving people's lives, but it'll just take one or two cases, current contemporary cases, and we're going to be shut down. So I would plead with members of the industry, when you see a company that's over the line, when you see that they're misrepresenting, when you see that their product is being laced with other chemicals, we need to confront that as an industry. We need to confront it. We need to stop it, because it is critical that we win this fight. So Mac, thanks for the opportunity. I turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. And there's really some great news about the Kratom community rallying around the globe. For those of you that don't know, Thailand is 11 hours ahead of the Eastern time zone. And I've learned that by sad experience, because I've been on the phone in the middle of the night with a lot of these people, but they're concerned in Thailand that all the progress that they have made to decriminalize Kratom, and their law went into effect yesterday that absolutely allows for farmers to under regulations to produce Kratom in commercial quantities for export to the United States and other global markets. And they don't want to see the WHO overturn all of their good work that took 2 years, 3 years actually, to get done. When I met with Health Minister Anton in January 2020, he expressed his commitment to get this done in Thailand, to completely decriminalize it and to make sure that people had access to what he characterized as a miracle plant. In Indonesia, despite all of the nonsense that we hear, and there is a lot of discussion going on over in Indonesia about Kratom, and there's infighting among government agencies, just like we have here in the United States, the BNN is not going to prevail there with all of their efforts to get a ban on kratom by next year. That's not going to happen. I have been in close contact with a number of government officials who say that they're going to be helping us at the WHO because they recognize that kratom has this tremendous benefit. And in the midst of the COVID, which has devastated Indonesia, you have that group of farmers, thousands and thousands of farmers who support their families by growing and processing kratom for export to the United States. And they're not going to let this thing go away when there's no replacement strategy, whatever, to help those people. So we've got time in order to work on those kinds of issues. And I think we're going to see a substantial amount of help. I've been in conversations with people in Malaysia, in the Philippines, and over in Europe, all of who are rallying at this point, identifying non-government organizations, advocates, comments being solicited. We just got a letter from Cambodia and Laos where they're going to help us with the WHO. So we're going to have a global presence at the WHO to show how wrong the FDA is. And I can tell you that when you look at that from that perspective, it provides us an opportunity to unify this message across the world. And we're going to take advantage of that as we sort through our presentations to the WHO. And from that, we're going to be a stronger advocacy organization going forward. So we're going to work hard on this. We need your help to redouble your efforts, to spread the word, to get everybody out that you can, to expand your social networks, make sure that they have commented, and they can do so through the AKA portal. It's on our website, protectkratom.org. We'll recirculate it through social media platforms. We just need to spread it as far and wide as we can. We're going to engage the vendors, again, to tell them to get this information out. But everything you can do to help us will be absolutely fabulous, because we can, by winning this battle, really put the FDA in a terrible position from their regulatory agenda, because they will have then been three-time losers. They've lost twice at the federal level in the United States. They've tried this end run around the federal law here to go to the international community, and hopefully they were going to dupe them into believing the nonsense they peddle about kratom. We're going to be there to tell the truth about it. So help us do that, and do everything you can in order to support us along the way. We have powerful scientific information. It's not just Dr. Henningfield, and this 8-factor analysis is now complete. It is being transmitted to the expert committee. It is being circulated around the country right now to state legislators as well, because this document lays the groundwork. But with him, we have over 24 scientists who are stepping up, and Dr. McCurdy, the leading NIDA grant contractor on kratom, had volunteered to go on his own dime to Geneva to speak up for kratom. Now, they've made it a virtual only meeting, so he'll be there, obviously, virtually testifying. But this action by the FDA is not something that the scientific community nor the advocacy community are going to take lying down. And so we'll continue to do that. I will turn it back over to Pete. I know someone made the comment that I sounded sick. I'm just tired. I'm not sick. And I can assure you that I'm going to drink my kratom, and it's going to be that energy boost. And we're going to keep fighting, because nobody's going to sleep between now and October 11th when we get this thing done. So Pete, I'll turn it back to you to handle questions and answers.
Pete, if I could weigh in here, I've been watching the chat. There was some concern about the comments I made about concentrating the alkaloids, synthesizing the alkaloids, or adulterating the product. Concentrating the alkaloids is not that would violate the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. Extracts are not concentrating the alkaloids, and I want to make that clear. We're not. This doesn't affect the products that are on the market that are derived from pure plant. It's only if those alkaloids are artificially concentrated rather than in the ratio and whatever that's found naturally. So I just want to make that clear, that extracts are not the same as concentrating the alkaloids.
Okay, very good. A couple questions that we do have, and again, folks, if you've got any questions, just hit the Q&A button and you could put them in there, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. This question, a little hard to get a good number on this, but how confident is the AK in stopping this in October with the WHO?
I'll take that on.
Okay, please.
With the help of every Kratom advocate, we're going to win this battle. Now, if it's going to be determined by the science, we're going to win this battle. If it's going to be determined by a balance between the science and then the public health impact, which is one of the criteria, and we look to harm reduction, we only have to look to the research that's been done by Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Grundman and Dr. Swager that talks about the benefits of Kratom offsetting any potential, even if you believe the theoretical claims that are made by some that Kratom may be dangerous. Certainly from a harm reduction standpoint, we win that battle on a public policy thing. So I am relatively confident, but what we cannot do is trust that just because we're right, we're going to win. We have to be there and loudly telling the WHO. We've hired a PR firm, we've hired lawyers, and we've got scientists on our side. We're leaving nothing to chance. And what we need now is your support, both in terms of the of getting the comments in, but also to the extent you can, your financial support, because these are expensive propositions. We won the battle on extending the comment period, but I can tell you it cost us a lot of money. Now, it didn't go well with the judge when she heard the weak explanations from the FDA, so their credibility was eroded. It didn't go well with the U.S. Attorney's Office that had to represent the FDA. They didn't like what the FDA was doing, so that was valuable to us to expose the weaknesses of the FDA's case. But this is a battle we're going to have to continue, and the only way we lose is if we lay down and act like everything's fine. Then we will lose, because the FDA will be able to just go in there and throw their weight around. We're going to be there fighting, toe to toe with them. And when that happens, we win because we're right and they're wrong. So keep supporting us as best you can.
There's another piece. There's another piece to this, Pete and Mac, and that is the FDA has been taking it on the chin on a number of recent pronouncements. This would be a huge black eye if they pursue this. Ultimately, we can't be complacent, but we've got the facts, we've got the science, we've got the reality is on our side on this. So is there a guarantee we're going to win this? No, there's no guarantee. But with the effort of everyone involved, I personally believe we're going to get there.
Mac, I know we answered this in the last call, but I think it's worth repeating. Should people be going out and buying large sums of Kratom right now in preparation for a negative decision in October?
No, and here's why. First off, the decision in October reasonably is only going to be that they would, if the worst case for us is they extend it for a year. Nobody needs to stockpile Kratom. Nobody needs to panic buy. I know that there was an effort made by the Kratom Herald to tell people they should do that. Consider who supports the Kratom Herald. It is a vendor that would benefit from people going out and hoarding Kratom right now and stockpiling it. Don't do that. This is a battle, and it's going to be as long as 2 years before we even get to the end point. Now, hopefully we'll resolve this issue right away in October, where they say we're not going to act on proceeding even to a critical review. But if they go to a critical review, we still got a year away. So I'm not worried about it. And there's a lot of fighting that will go on before then. And you need only to get the supply of Kratom that you need for now. You don't need to stockpile it in any way.
Can we say now, have we confirmed any folks within the scientific community who will be testifying before the WHO in October for Kratom?
Sure. Dr. McCurdy is going to be there. Dr. Henningfield, Dr. Eustace, Dr. Swager, Dr. Brown. I could go on. I mean, they're all lining up now. What will happen is the staff at the WHO expert committee will have to decide who they're going to let speak, and that's going to be, depending on how many people sign up, they're going to have to look at who they are and whether they allow them to speak. So we certainly will advise the WHO that these are the leading scientists, and will document it with the science that they have. And so hopefully those prominent scientists will get their say on this. I mean, this is a political process in many ways. And remember, the FDA is acting like, because they're trying to hedge their bets here, they're saying, oh, we didn't have anything to do with this. 2 years ago, they were in a conversation at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and they prompted the discussion by Singapore and the Philippines and Malaysia to speak against Kratom, and the FDA was their cheerleader. It is the same way they got states in between 2012 and 2016 to ban Kratom when there wasn't any pushback against them. They told their lies, and the state said, oh, well, this is a dangerous substance, we should ban it. And then from 2016 on, they haven't won a single battle in the states. And we've had 18 states have tried to ban it. We've beaten all of those. So we can win this battle if we stay focused on what we need to do and making sure that we hold the FDA accountable. They're not getting off the end of this spear. They started this fight. We're going to finish it for them with good science.
And I know, Mac, we answer this question, but I think it's always important to continue to ask each one of these webinars that we have. Doug asks, do we know why the FDA refuses to see the reality of this? The evidence seems so overwhelming for Kratom, yet the FDA continues the war against Kratom. Do we know why they're doing this?
Well, one thing everyone should know, there is not a unanimous anti-Kratom position at the FDA. That was evidenced by a meeting that Dr. Henningfield had on a very important scientific study about Kratom, which will be published in about 2 or 3 months, about the safety of Kratom. And in that meeting, the scientists were very, very welcoming of the results of that study. The policy people were upset about it because it conflicted with their narrative, and they started challenging it, even though the protocol that was used for this particular study is the one that they recommend for these kinds of safety studies. So the FDA is going to continue their anti-Kratom position. But remember, this started decades ago. They made the very same arguments against dietary supplements in the early 90s, and that's why Congress had to slap them down with the DSHEA Act, which significantly limited the authority of the FDA to regulate dietary supplements. We need to do the same thing with Kratom. We're only going to win this fight if we win in Geneva, and then we come back to the US Congress and say, this proves that the FDA will never stop, and you've got to apply some reasonable standards on how Kratom can be in the marketplace, and force the FDA to have limited regulatory authority over it as a food, or for those vendors that want to make structure function claims, to make it a new dietary ingredient notification that they reasonably and fairly adjudicate to allow those kinds of products to get on the market. That's the solution here, and we're going to keep fighting with the Congress to make sure they pass a law that does that.
So I think we can maybe open this one up for a few other folks. We know the process is going to WHO in October. If we're not able to stop it there and it's a negative outcome for us in October, that then continues on a multiple months, if not over a year-long process. Are we concerned, though, that if we lose, for lack of a better word, aren't able to stop this in October, that this would lead to proposed state bans coming in January, that this would be additional ammunition that the FDA could use to propose bans in different states around the country?
So I'll let David and Kurt answer this directly, but I can tell you that until there's a final decision, they can't make a credible argument to that point. And in fact, we will be able to turn them on them that this is just their hurrah circumventing the federal law. But David and Kurt, you can respond better than me on that.
My experience, having traveled now to a number of states, probably about 30 states, and speaking with colleagues across the country, I don't believe that a ban will go viral at the state level based on the foundation that we've been laying for the last 2.5 years. I think the issue of a ban is really if it is scheduled or if the federal government takes action. I think that's where the real threat comes with the FDA, but not at the state level. State legislators are far more in tune with their constituents. They are far more responsive to their constituents. And even in states where Kratom has been illegal, the users of Kratom have come out in astounding numbers, publicly speaking out in their own state where Kratom, in the 6 states where Kratom is illegal. Wisconsin's an example. They flooded the committee room. We're seeing that across the country. David, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, we have to use this as an opportunity to not be complacent, because Kurt, you're right. However, it only works when we have aggressive grassroots people sharing their stories with lawmakers and doing it repetitively and ad nauseum. And so none of this will be helpful, obviously, if the FDA is able to make a movement here. Because as everyone knows, most people still do not know what Kratom is. When you talk to most lawmakers, unless we've had meetings with them, unless you have contacted them personally, still they don't know. And if the FDA can get to them before we can, it doesn't make the scenario easy. So bottom line, from what I've seen, I think Kurt is absolutely right that grassroots organization that happens from all of us, and it doesn't have to be a high-priced lobbyist. It can be you just reaching out to your lawmaker and making sure that they know what's going on and how important Kratom is to you and why it being regulated and accessible is so important. So if you haven't done that yet, if you haven't spoken to your state senator and your state representative, do that. Do that tomorrow. Make a phone call. Call them. If you can't talk to them, leave them a message, because that is the most powerful stuff. Lawmakers respond to their constituents. That happens all the time. And many times we get frustrated and we think that we won't make a difference. Well, if we call and we're persistent, we will. And that's why we need to use as much energy that we can over this next month, because this will either put us forward or set us back. And we have this window, and that's why I just want to jump on that bandwagon. And from my expertise and experience, just urge everyone to do everything you can. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but as long as there's clock, in the game, there's still time. We need to do everything we can, because until that clock runs out, there's still time, and there's still time to make a difference.
And just to add to that, the same thing that's true at the state level is true internationally. We have retained attorneys in Indonesia, in Thailand, and in Laos, working with the governments, because you have to do it the way that they require. We've set up websites to collect comments in Thailand. I'm told that we're going to get tens of thousands of comments there. That would be understandable given their current posture. We have a website up in Indonesia collecting comments. We're working with the growers groups over there to do that. We've got an attorney, a law firm that's working with the Indonesian government right now. So these are expensive things, as I mentioned earlier. We budgeted a budget of $1.5 million to run this entire program on the WHO. We've raised about $750,000 of that. So we're about halfway there. We're going to keep rattling the tin cup. We're going to ask the advocates to help us. We're going to ask the vendors to help us more. But this is a big deal. And I don't want to underestimate it by saying that I'm optimistic we're going to win. I'm optimistic we're going to win if we show. And by show, I mean we have every resource and asset that we can bring to the table. And that includes these other countries that we're working with right now and getting them engaged using obviously distant law firms to help us in lobbying those government entities. So please help us along that way and encourage your vendors to do the same. But thank you.
And just to underscore that a little bit more, Mac, 1.5 million is a huge number, and that number is on top of the regular work that we do in keeping Kratom legal across the United States. So we normally are rattling the tin cup, for lack of a better phrase, on just normal operations of the American Kratom Association and making sure that we've got lobbying teams in various states around the country, make sure that we've got our legal teams looking at different situations around the country. So we really do need your help. This is the biggest endeavor that we've taken, frankly, since 2016. And so as we tell folks, it's all hands on deck, because if we don't fund this, the option is that it ultimately could all go away. And that's what we're working very hard. We are taking this extremely seriously. We're reaching out to the vendor community. We're reaching out to all of you to try and fund this very aggressive strategy that we feel, if we can get funded, will be successful. A couple more questions here. a couple folks have commented on 5 minutes not being much at all, especially for folks within the scientific community. Is there any way to petition the WHO to extend or make exceptions for folks who maybe need a little bit more than 5 minutes?
So I agree. It's a ridiculous number, but it's their rule and they're entitled to impose it. We are working with consultants to make sure that the members of the expert committee have the sufficient documentation that will support the verbal and oral testimony that's provided. So that's another pathway that we've developed using consultants that have worked with the UN WHO expert committee before. We're confident that we're going to get into the hands of those expert committee members the information. We recognize that the opponents are going to be doing the same thing, but this is just a function. It is possible that they will say, we've had so much interest in this that they will expand from 2 hours to maybe 4 or 6 hours, and that might loosen up the time frame. But right now it's 5 minutes, and we have to live with that, and we're going to do that, play by the rules, but we're also going to make sure that we take advantage of every opportunity to get into the hands of those expert committee members the data that they need to make an informed decision.
Mac, can I make a comment on that
Please,
same point?
please.
For folks who are listening, don't freak out about the 5 minutes. You're absolutely correct that that's a short period of time. And that's what the US Congress does too. When you testify in front of the US Congress, at least technically there's a 5-minute limit to your oral statement, but there's no limit at all to your formal written statement and any other information that you want to attach to that. So what Mac and the team is doing and will be doing as far as making sure that all the appropriate information is in the hands of the staff, that's what's going to matter more, because at the end of the day, the commission members and their staff, they really are going to look at everything. That doesn't mean that they will rule the way we want them to, but they're not just going to, those people themselves, regardless of what we think about the FDA, the folks at the commission, they're not going to ignore the information that is provided to them. That's another reason why this is such a potentially long, drawn-out bureaucratic process, because there's a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff takes a lot of time. That's just the way it is.
Absolutely. And Jeff, if you can stay with here a second. Mac talked about there are a few folks within the FDA who really have their sights out for Kratom. Some folks are wondering, where are the other agencies within the federal government, their stance on Kratom? Where's NIDA? Where's DEA? How do they feel about Kratom, and where do they play in this process? So I guess maybe Mac and Jeff, if you could comment on that.
Well, sure. I guess I can start. It's still a little bit of a mystery as to what the real, if there is even an official opinion these days at the DEA. The fact of the matter is that when the DEA had an opportunity to move to scheduling, they didn't. And as a couple of us have mentioned in the past, that never happens, ever. When DEA has got a glide path towards scheduling, that's what they do. They're drug police. So whether we like them or not, that's in their DNA. If they have, if there's been some kind of a scheduling move and they have an unobstructed runway, if you will, they go and schedule. So the fact that they never moved on this matters a lot. And now you have a still relatively new administration. And to be perfectly blunt, I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet a fair amount of money that folks in leadership at the DEA, if you said the word Kratom, they'd look at you and wonder what the hell you were talking about, for better or worse. I can tell you for certain that while, to my knowledge, leadership at NIDA hasn't said something public like, oh my God, no, don't do that. There is zero question that leadership on down within the scientific staff at NIDA are quite opposed to scheduling for all of the reasons that we've all talked about for these past couple of years in terms of the difficult, if not impossible, task of funding and conducting research. And that's where they live. And for those of you who aren't tired of hearing from me and others about the difficulties around doing research on Schedule I substances, it's a nightmare. And while it is not impossible, there's years and years of evidence that shows how difficult it is, and it's close enough to impossible that it really it kills any knowledge generation. So there is zero question that NIDA is still against it, and hopefully that will have some sway within the administration. I mean, and you know, there's also, remember, you know, the way we and other advocates, all of us, all the couple of hundred of you that are on the line, all of your colleagues, the way we talk about this product, this plant, matters as well. Because, you know, if we talk about the science and talk about relying on the science, et cetera, as you've heard Mac and others do for a few years now, that matters a lot. If we do, quite frankly, what the cannabis people did in early years and talking about it's a plant, therefore it's okay, I can assure you that regardless of any of our individual opinions about that kind of messaging, at least within the federal bureaucracy here, I can't speak to internationally, but if you say that kind of thing to current feds, they are going to switch you off. So I would urge us to continue to talk about the science, continue to talk about the evidence, and you know, the somewhat easier argument to, you know, to make it it's a natural product, it's a plant, therefore it's all right. Don't go there, because it's really going to turn off people you don't want to turn off. So that's just that's a little bit of a bugaboo. I know that not everybody wants to hear that, but that's one thing that I ask you to trust me on.
And I would add two things that we need to keep in mind as we think about our strategies. First off, Washington's a political town. And what happened in 2018 is that we were within hours of having Kratom scheduled because Scott Gottlieb, then the commissioner of the FDA, was bullying the DEA to do it. They'd had the recommendation at the agency, at the DEA, for months. And he was finally throwing his weight around. He went to the Trump White House, got the Domestic Policy Council to force the DEA to agree. He got stopped because of two ethical people that were principled about this, and that was Brian Harrison, then the Deputy Chief of Staff at HHS, and Dr. Joie, the Assistant Secretary for Health, who, when he was first asked about it, and he's the responsible official, when he was asked about it, he said, well, the FDA says it's bad stuff, we probably ought to schedule it. And Brian Harrison asked him, please look into it, because I need to know whether it's a good decision or not. And after a 2-week deep dive into the science, Dr. Joie said that Gottlieb was wrong, that the FDA was wrong, and that he could not support it. And they literally, in the middle of the night, late night, had to withdraw it before the DEA would pull the trigger, because Gottlieb had gone ballistic at that point, learning that Joie was going to do it. Second point is that this is something that just happens with new administrations, but Congressman Pocan, in an oversight hearing where he was questioning Secretary Becerra of HHS about Kratom, and he said, and Congressman Pocan expressed his concern about the FDA's position, and Secretary Becerra, brand new to the position, not understanding his statutory obligation to be the independent reviewer of the recommendations for scheduling, said on the record that he trusted the FDA. The FDA does everything according to science. Now we have to re-educate that man, because he's wrong. The FDA does things that have nothing to do with science, but really for their regulatory agenda. And they've proven that consistently. Not every decision the FDA makes is wrong. Obviously it's not, but they're not pure. And they, in this particular arena, they're wrong because they have this bias against natural plants. They have bias against dietary supplements. They have a bias against virtually anything that's not in the path to be a new drug application. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we can't let the WHO distract us from doing the other stuff. So we're going to do the best we can to fight on all of these fronts. But Washington, D.C. is a tough place, and we can't let our guard down. We're going to be in there fighting every day, both internationally and here on the federal level, and still keeping our preparations going for the state KCPAs, which we have to start in September in preparing for the January sessions of the legislatures.
Max, somebody asked a process question. I'm not exactly sure of the answer. Who within the WHO makes the decision? Is it a panel? Is it a committee? Do we know who's on that panel or committee who ultimately would make the decision?
The World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence are scientists, and they are people that volunteer internationally. And they have they're all going to be, the names will be published within a couple of weeks. We have a pretty good idea based on who's been on them before, who those people will be. We're going to obviously speak directly to them as scientists. But yes, this is a process that in a perfect world, science would win the day. We know there's a combination of politics and science. So we've got to make sure the science argument is strong and that they can't ignore it. So that's going to be our goal going forward. But I believe that we're going to have the upper hand when it comes to the WHO review, because these are not a group like the UN Commission on Narcotics, narcotic drugs. They're a bunch of politicians. These guys are the scientists. So I think we're going to be in good stead there to talk on the science issues with respect to Kratom.
I've had a couple people ask this question, and I've been holding it off because we've been waiting for the answer. But while on this call, I actually just received confirmation. It's a little bit of an announcement here, and we're very excited to make this announcement. Starting September 1st, and you'll hear the details on it, but we have somebody who is willing to match donations for the first couple weeks of September. It's been a few months since we've been able to find somebody who's been willing to do that. We've got a very generous donation or very generous donor who has agreed to do that. So be on the lookout for that email. It'll start in September. And we've got normally, I think it's a couple weeks to get as many donations in. And this donor, who happens to be a vendor, has agreed to match those donations. So we're very excited about that. Let's absolutely leverage this opportunity and get as many donations in as possible. If you have any more questions, please, last opportunity to put them in there. I don't see anything new as of right now. As we give folks a final chance to make statements, maybe I'll look. Senator Bramble, do you have any final comments before we end tonight's call?
All I can say is that this is a battle that has been joined by folks from across the political spectrum, across the demographic spectrum. This is a battle that we cannot afford to lose. We're in it to get it across the finish line.
Thank you very much, Senator Bramble. David, do you have any final comments you wanted to make?
Just that I would just want to thank everyone that's
Well, we lost him, but he thanked.
I guess those were his final comments. Jeff, did you have anything that you wanted to say before we ended the call?
I just want to thank everybody for working so hard. And, my role with the AKA is, as a consultant, is to torture everybody with science, science, science. Thankfully, I don't have to work too hard to get everyone to go along with that, and keep it up.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And Mac, do you have any final comments for tonight before we end the call?
We have had the opportunity to hear from numerous Kratom consumers, and I have heard them in hearing after hearing. Senator Bramble's heard them. I know that Jeff was with me up in Oregon. We've heard these repeated. Out of the blue, we had a call from a guy who is a former Navy SEAL who had some injuries that were debilitating to him, and he was being prescribed the medications that you would expect, and that he was suffering mightily to the point that he couldn't even speak. And it was recommended that he take Kratom. This hero spoke eloquently, and he's relearning getting his ability to speak back. And he's willing to do a video testimonial for us. And we are grateful for that. We're sending a camera crew down to his home to do that. That's the story of Kratom. It's not the FDA's overzealous anti-Kratom kind of message. It's about people whose lives have been literally saved. And we hear it and we know it. And that's what's going to move the needle when it comes right down to it. And that's what makes the work that we're doing so critically important, because all of those voices will be snuffed out if the FDA gets their way. And we can't let that happen, whether it's internationally or here in the United States or in your community. We've got to fight back everywhere we can. And we're dedicated to it. I hope you sense that we're just going to fight this battle as hard as we can. And we're going to go down swinging if we go down at all, but we're going to win. Look at our track record. We've beaten them at their own game. And we just need to continue to fight, not let apathy get in our way, because that's the only thing that will defeat us now. And that's ourselves, because we've got the science and we've got the messaging that is so critical to public health. we can't lose unless we just get apathetic. So let's put our shoulder to the wheel and keep pushing here.
Thank you very much, Mac. Mac, thank you. Kurt, Jeff, David, thank you so much for all the work that you do. Everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. We have recorded this call. We will be sending out a link. Please feel free to forward this to friends, family, anyone who you think would be interested in helping in the fight to keep Kratom legal. Thank you, everyone.
One last thing, Pete, and,
Yes.
and I just noticed on the comments that there are people that say that they have video capabilities. Please get to Pete and offer those services. They can help us dramatically, and the more we can get those kind of in-kind services, the less money we have to pay out, and we can stretch our budgets further with you doing that. So please, anybody who has these kind of resources, get that information to Pete so we can tap into it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
David, did you want to say something? I know you got cut off there.
Sorry, but yes.
That's okay.
I was just going to say I'm a broken record, but I think, what's been said tonight is so true that it's really all of you, your advocacy that makes all the difference. If you can make a contribution to the American Kratom Association, please do that. And you can all make a phone call and visit your lawmakers. Make sure the comments are filed, but your advocacy is really what's going to do it and make sure that Kratom remains accessible to the millions of people that depend on it in the United States. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and it's an honor to work with you in this cause. So thank you and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care.
Thanks.